Right, so we're going to do an end of year report card for the Munster teams. We're going to do the Leinster teams later. But let's start off with Munster. And this isn't just the Munster Hurling Championship. We want to talk about how they did beyond that, if they did progress. Obviously, not all the teams did. But we'll do it alphabetically. We'll start off with Clare. How did we rate them? We're going to do it like it's a school report. So A plus, A minus. Are we going to go with A and A plus, or are we going to throw in an A minus as well?
I'd say A plus, A minus. Yeah, I'd say the three variants. It's like when you're doing ratings. I like having a 0.5 in the ratings because someone could be like very harshly given a 7, but not have done enough to get an 8. Do you know what I mean? So the 0.5 is a nice get out.
10?
At no stage ever.
I mean, as a looker.
Definitely at no stage ever.
Okay, we'll start off with Clare then. Finished top of the round-robin group stages. Munster final only beaten by, you could say a point, or you could say a refereeing decision, whatever way you want to look at it. Could have gone to extra time 2 years in a row. Blew up, of course, in an All-Ireland semi-final. Not quite to the same level as the year before, but didn't really perform the way that they'd want to perform in an All-Ireland semi-final. What would you be looking at here? Like, given the talent they have and the fact that this should be their prime years now, can you actually score them that highly?
Yeah, I wouldn't say they blew up in an All-Ireland semi-final. They were down at 5 at half-time, but they were in a good position. Was it 19-17? They had themselves in a winning position in that game until they got caught in possession and the goal kind of turned the game. Were it not for Owen Murphy's save from Peter Duggan, maybe we would have been going to extra time. Maybe Clare would have won in normal time. But their Munster round robin was outstanding. Their Munster final was very good, and they will feel harshly done by there. But like at the end of the day, they finished the year without silverware again. And there were a couple of things that happened throughout the year. We'll say, who picked up Galan in the Munster final? Bit of a mystifying decision there. Playing the sweeper in the All-Ireland semi-final. Bit of a mystifying kind of decision there. They obviously were brilliant against Dublin in that All-Ireland quarter-final.
Well, Dublin were brutal. I mean, they didn't set up with a sweeper and needed to, and basically just followed the men out the field. Clare were able to run through them. But if you want to finish out your point, but I do want to say that, like, with the quality of players and the fact that so many of them are in their prime now, like John Conlon, I know he took that big blow against Dublin. Tony Kelly, Shane O'Donnell. There's definitely a few more as well you could put in that bracket. And I know they were unlucky with Conor Cleary or whatever. He came back and he gave a good performance. But given the level of talent they have now, they didn't really do much more than they did last year. And in a way, not even getting to extra time in the Munster final would suggest maybe they did slightly less.
Yeah, listen, as I said, Shane, about the silverware as well, they don't have anything to show. They're the team that looked like they can take Limerick down, and they were the only team to beat Limerick, obviously. Throughout the 2023 championship, Limerick finished with all the trophies, and Clare were the only team to beat them in a really, really, really meaningful game or whatever. So, like, that earns them, a bit of credit or whatever. But as you say there, with players in their prime, it's just disappointing. And getting to an All-Ireland final was the minimum, realistically. Yeah. It was. And like we saw from the All-Ireland final as well, Kilkenny are a good side. They're not a great side, and Clare weren't able to get over them. So for me, it's probably a B, but it's probably a low B because I see it as a missed opportunity. A couple of missed opportunities this year for Clare.
If they won an All-Ireland, it'd be A+, yeah? If they got to a final and lost it, but played well, it'd probably be an A. If they went to the final and fairly poor, you'd probably say B. If they had to win their semi-final, maybe a B+ would be okay, or a normal B. Sorry, a B+ if they got to the final, didn't do great. I think it's B- at the absolute best. But that might even be if they won Munster, given the talent and the fact that they seem to be building towards it. I think a C+ and I'm saying that almost as a compliment to what they have at their disposal. They got decisions wrong. They were unlucky then, I suppose, in semi-final, Ryan Taylor getting injured. But it can't just be bad luck every single day. So it can't be bad luck that they imploded last year in the semi-final. It can't be bad luck that for long spells of the semi-final this year, they didn't play great stuff. I don't know. I think C+ at best.
I'll go with you on a C+, yeah. B- and C+ they're teetering on the same thing. So I've no issue there because I just see I just see there was a couple of missed opportunities. That's all. They had to get to an All-Ireland final this year. They just had to. They had to find a way. And I suppose another criticism is that they just haven't been able to find a way in these big games, like in the semi-finals, in the Munster finals, as close as they've been. Yeah, they just haven't been able to find a way. Still haven't won a championship game in Croke Park since the 2013 replay. Do you know what I mean? I think C plus is fair. And I'll tell you why it's fair. It's fair because of what they have at their disposal. That's why it's fair. And if anything, it's nearly a compliment to them, to be honest with you.
Yeah. So Cork then, 2022 they got out of Munster and should have beaten Galway in the quarterfinal, but of course they didn't. Left it behind them. They had plenty of chances to win that game. This year, the feeling is that they played a bit better under Pat Ryan, and yet they didn't qualify. But they were just a hair's breadth from qualifying with the way the results were going in the final day. Like, they're actually very, very hard to score.
Has any team earned more credit without qualifying from Munster than Cork? Because it's like, we don't know how they would have fared in a preliminary quarterfinal, in an All-Ireland quarterfinal or semi-final, but everyone sees it as, it's like the eye-catching horse that finishes with a flourish, and he doesn't run for a while, and everyone thinks, oh yeah, but remember what this lad did here or whatever. We didn't get to see the next performance. We didn't get to see whether they would kick on or not. But when you look at their results, beaten by Clare by 1 in Ennis, beaten by Limerick by 1, like the championship could have been completely different. If they would have been completely different if they gotten a result in either of those games. Drew a tip, beat Waterford pretty comprehensively. We definitely saw signs that the wheel is turning, and a good few of the young faces are kind of coming through. But then they're kind of thinking they're still relying on Patrick Horgan. Maybe they're still relying on Seamus Harnedy. I think a B for Cork would be, I think it would be generous.
Yeah,
being honest with you, because when you're looking at what was their sole aim this year, I would say it was get out of Munster. And you can say they were unlucky here or there, or there was a free bot at the end of the Clare game, maybe that robbed them of a minute, maybe to get 11 score. But they didn't, as much as we think there's lots of potential there or whatever, they didn't achieve what they wanted to achieve at the start of the year. That's the nuts and bolts of it.
They showed good staying power in their games. Like remember at one stage against Clare, they were being well beaten and they found a way to come back. So we'll give them a lot of credit for things they did well. And I think Pat Ryan, it looks like they're moving in the right direction, because to push Limerick that close, and so many teams are losing narrowly to Limerick, or Limerick are getting a draw when it looks like they should have been beaten, that sort of thing. But yeah, their only victory was over a fairly bedraggled looking Waterford team in that opening fixture that they had. Obviously, Waterford had played against Limerick the week before and played quite well. But after that, yeah, couldn't beat Tipperary after getting a brilliant start. And I wonder if Jason Ford hadn't gone off, and every team had loads of injuries, don't get me wrong. But I wonder if he hadn't gone off injured early in the game, might Tipperary have steadied down and won that game. But look, Tipperary were unconvincing in a lot of ways as well. Robbie O'Flynn being injured, that was a huge blow to them last year. I don't know. I think C plus would be about right as well.
I wonder is the All Ireland under-20 success feeding into the potential thing as well, and the fact that people would maybe give them a higher grade or put them in the B category because all these lads are coming. There is evidence that you can see the wheel is turning. As you said, they show good staying power. But I think that's kind of feeding into it as well. I think anything more than a C plus would be generous enough, I'd say. Like, how you have to realistically think about it. How would Pat Ryan rate his season?
Yeah,
I think C plus, and like you can say, maybe like Clare people are probably going to go nuts in the sense that you're giving Cork a C plus and you're giving Clare a C plus. One finished 4th in Munster, one finished top of Munster. But I think C plus is fair for Cork.
Yeah, Cork's players aren't at their peak just yet. Like, okay, obviously 1 or 2 are at their peak, or some would say gone beyond their peak. But it's a good point here from 36 and counting. But lads, they didn't deserve to win any of those close games. Tip were the better team in Cork. They could have no complaints. They can't win a battle, keep saying it. And okay, do they need to prove to us that there's a bit more metal? I thought at times there was this year. Look at the amount of league games where they were behind, and came back to win. The Wexford game, one in particular, they were well behind. They came back to win that game. So I thought that was quite impressive. Like, I look at their team here, let's say the team that played the last game of the year against Limerick, and go through it. Patrick Collins, he's a solid player. Niall O'Leary's solid. Been there for quite a while, as has Damien Cahalane and Sean O'Donoghue. Half backline, Jerry Millerick's had a few years. Kieran Joyce is really settling down as a big player. Robert Downey's going from strength to strength. I think we've both said that a lot. Brian Roach, he's really developing. Luke Mead is probably in his, maybe sixth season. It's about 2018 or 17 that he came on the scene. Tim O'Mahony, maybe he'll start to really bed in the forward line. Dar Fitzgibbon, he should really be coming to the boil now. Declan Dalton made a bit of a comeback. Shane Kingston, we're always just waiting for that form to really kind of get there as a starter. Patrick Horgan, he has another year in him. Seamus Harnedy, the likes of Brian Hayes, Ethan Toomey, Shane Barrett, Conor Lahan, will he be there? Pádraig Power. Yeah, do you know what? I don't know if they could have done much more with what they have looking at that. Like if Robbie O'Flynn was fit and firing all year and there's probably another injury or two I'm not thinking of, I don't know if we could have expected too much more from him this past season.
Yeah, that's why I think probably something like a C+ is probably fair enough, to be honest with you. Clare people are probably going to go mad that they're only a C+, but I actually think that's a compliment.
Richard's not happy here.
Yeah, Richard Hogan just says, surely round results count more than league performances. Clare need to be a B in that case. Come on, Shane. I love the way it's just directed at you. I think a C+ is fair for Cork, I have to say.
Yeah, okay. So next team then to talk about, Limerick, A+ and leave it at that.
Well, they won the league, they won Munster somehow, and they won the All-Ireland. They won the All-Ireland playing some of their best stuff at the end of the championship. Look at the last 45 against Cork and look at the last 35, 40 minutes against Kilkenny. They timed it absolutely perfect.
Galway and Kilkenny.
Galway and Kilkenny, sorry, yeah. And
they
won
have 15-point swings after kind of maybe absorbing the storm early on. They won from some point in the first half to the end by 15 points. It was so comprehensive.
They won an All-Ireland without Declan Hannon, the most successful captain in hurling history, and Sean Finn, until the All-Stars are given out this year, their most decorated player in that term as well. So they're their best man marker and their quarterback at centre-back. Like, how scary is that for next year? How scary is that? Don't get me wrong, someone else will go down next year and they'll be missing somebody else. But the fact that they showed that they were able to do it without the two of them and it was just business as usual. Yes, there were moments in the All-Ireland where maybe Owen Cody's goal chance and a couple of other bits and pieces where the game might have turned, but you kind of just think Limerick would have found a way anyway. So when you win the three big competitions that you take part in,
it's like, and also under the pressure of doing a Munster 5 in a row in like a bear pit of a championship and doing the 4 in a row, beating two teams. So not only did they see off everyone in Munster, they then saw off the best of Leinster as well. I don't think you can give anything but an A+, especially how comprehensive it was in those last two games.
Yeah, no, I'd go along with that. At the end of the day, they ticked every box that they wanted to tick this year. So you can't say any less than that. And in the All-Ireland final, were they as good as we've seen them in that second half of the All-Ireland final? Probably.
Yeah, and I mean, there was no debate midway through the second half. It was just game over and done, wasn't it? And yeah, fantastic stuff. So you have to give credit to them. Tipperary, so A+ there. We move on to Waterford.
Tipperary season is hard enough it's kind of a tricky one to assess. It was a good league and a good 40-45 minutes against Limerick, and they brought some of that into the championship. A lot of Clare people would say that were it not for some goalkeeping mistakes, Tip would have done well to win a Munster championship game this year. Hard enough to probably argue with that. Probably missed opportunity. Probably should have beaten Cork realistically. Could have beaten Limerick, and then they were brutal against Waterford. Brilliant against
Galway.
Yeah, and very, very bad against Galway. You can throw in that they were brilliant against Offaly, but let's call it a spade a spade. There's serious golfing class there, so I don't even know if that game would merit any part of the grade going up or down. Realistically, yeah, it's probably a low C. It's probably a low C for me now. Some people will say, oh, what was the difference between Tipperary this year and Tipperary last year? And to me, that's blind. Like, if you can't see that, I honestly do think it's blind. There were poles apart. Players in completely different shape. There was a different attitude. There was a different style. There was a clear pattern about how Tipperary were playing. Did it work the whole time? No. Did they have the players to play that game plan the whole time? No. Did they have a big strength in depth? Probably not. But that's something that will develop. But to me, comparing Tipperary in 2022 and 2023 are two completely different debates.
Well, I think that's a lot of people just being mischievous and just trying to find a way to bash Tip and say, they're no better than the year before. And look, you hunted Colin Bonner out of town. And look, that was very unfortunate the way that happened. But Tipperary did need to make a change. And I think that was proven, even if the results, like qualifying out of Munster is great, but obviously losing to Waterford in that manner was desperate. Losing to Galway without putting your best foot forward in any way, shape, or form. Like Galway were full value and should have won by more. And I remember saying that on Galway Bay FM straight away after the game, saying I have no arguments here with the way that game went. There was a few decisions I wasn't happy about at the time, but really, like Danny Mack here says, Tip were desperate against Galway. But like you do have to at the same time say, right, so Barry Heffernan wasn't there, Paddy Cadell wasn't there, Jared Brown was out injured. There was another player or two as well. So there were players there for Tipperary that probably would have been right in there to play some big games and just weren't available. And that's part of the reason that the strength and depth wasn't there. Now, Richard Hogan says Tip played better this year, but probably didn't get the results the performances deserved. Cork game was the one that got away. Yeah, Tipperary should have beaten Cork that day, but had such a desperate start to the game. So, like, have players kind of developed and come on a little bit this year? Yeah, I'd say for the most part, you could say that. I think Jake Morris has shown he's ready to kick on to the next level, and at times did. I think Brian O'Mara is settling down nicely. Owen Connolly settled down nicely. He produced some good performances throughout the year. I think Conor Bowe gave flashes that he's got something. So I don't think Tipperary are going to be too far away in terms of like being best of the rest next year. We're still going to obviously look at Limerick as being the number one. But I wouldn't get overly carried away with what Tipperary did either, because the manner of kind of petering out. And I'd probably say C-.
Yeah, I throw Connor Stakelum and Mark Keogh into that as well. There's signs that they're going to be, very good players at intercounty level. I think C- is kind of fair enough, to be honest with you. Like imagine to say, like before the Waterford game, that you'd be giving Tip a C-. Tip should have been in the Munster final. Like, do you know what I mean? Tip had 2 feet, like what, a foot and 3 toes in a Munster final, and then they made. They were just brutal against Waterford, like terrible, so bad. And the fact that then they would go and blow Offaly away, and then to be, as Richard said, desperate against Galway, and they still made the game competitive and could have got a result. But yeah, I think C- is fair, to be honest with you. And I think Liam Cattell is his harshest critic, and he would see plenty of good things that they did, but he'd see plenty of room for improvement next year too.
Yeah, and like Rhys Shelley, he's developed himself as a very good goalkeeper. You've obviously got Brian Hogan there as well. Michael Breen was moved back into wing back, so that like in year one he did very well there. Alan Tynan really developed himself this year. Gerard O'Connor, and then there's more under 20s that'll probably be coming online in the next year or two. And obviously I'll be finding out very, very much within my own house what's coming from the under 20s, because obviously people would have seen that Paddy's a coach for that next year. But like I do think that there's talent coming. And I do think that there's 1 or 2 players to come back from injury, and Tipperary can kick on. There'll obviously be 1 or 2 retirements, you'd imagine. But, the young blood has to come through at some stage. So, that's just that's life, really.
Consistency, Shano, is the big one for me. Tip showed flashes of what they could do, and then they showed flashes of also what they can do as well in a negative way, and with a couple of non-performances. But yeah, I think C- is more than fair.
Waterford, right? So 4 games. Did very well the first day out against Limerick. Nobody was expecting them to do as well as they did. Now, go on if you actually go before that and talk about the league, there was all the red cards. It was the weaker side of the league, didn't get through to the semi-finals. Drew with Dublin despite going down to 13 men. And for a nice period of time, they were down to 13 men. And against Tipperary, doing quite well until a red card as well. The other teams in the group maybe not quite as strong as the other group for sure. So they were good against Waterford Limerick when no one expected it. They were brutal against Cork the next day out, losing by 9. Then they were beaten 222-16 against Clare, really bad that day. And then it was a 6-point hammering against Tipperary. Like realistically, they were very, very far superior. But the problem that we had was like players playing out of position all over the shop. Hard to know exactly what they're doing. Like Limerick go out every day, you know exactly what Limerick are going to do, but it's just so hard to stop. Whereas Waterford go out there, you don't know what they're going to do, and you just wonder what's it building towards. So there's part of me that's just really, really frustrated watching them, and then there's another part thinking, well, what if they got Everton moving in the right direction with Patrick Fitzgerald starting inside alongside Desi, and if you got Ozzy mixed in there as well, of course, obviously somewhere along along the line. What about Billy Nolan? That was a success, putting him in centre back. Now, it was only one game against a very poor Tip offering that day. Like, you still got Patrick Curran. Why didn't we see too much of him this year? Stephen Bennett, so they have a load of talent, but we just didn't see enough from it overall. And I think it'd be very hard to give too much more than a D.
Yeah, for the talent that they have, Shane, you'd have to say that 2023 was a disaster. And if you take the Tip game out of it, like, and how much stock are you taking in the Tip game? Waterford are out of the championship. Do you know what I mean? But now, on the flip of that, they also played the Tip game without Conor Prunty, without Austin Gleeson, and without Tyg de Borca, who obviously got injured early in the championship. So then you're thinking their best performance was delivered without, three of their mainstays. Maybe we should be giving that more stock. But, like, I just don't think it should have taken that long in the year to realise we need to play Patrick Fitzgerald and Desi Hutchinson inside, and we need to play them really, 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 really close to goal and offer that kind of threat. The league was a write-off. Outside of that Limerick game, it was like two limp performances. When their season was on the line against Clare and against Cork, it was two really, really poor performances. No point in saying any different. And it was hard to see the rhyme and reason of what they were doing. So, yeah, like I'd be looking at a low D, to be honest with you, a low D.
When you see Darragh Lyons back in his own full back line, marking Tony Kelly, and I know last weekend he was back, well, from what I saw of the game, he seemed to be back marking Desi Hutchinson. So it's not like he's never played there. This is for Dungarvan. But I don't know. Surely, like, Waterford have got more specialist man markers. If he's playing back there, okay, put a man on him back there. If he moves out midfield, if he keeps swapping over and back, you need to find somebody who's comfortable in both positions. Now, maybe that's the most comfortable player they had for it, but I'm not sure that I totally agree. In the past, they put Calum Lyons on him, and obviously that might sort of decommission him as an attacking weapon. But it didn't decommission Mikey Butler when he was playing for Kilkenny. If you have everything else right around him, are you willing to sacrifice Calum Lyons and what he brings to your team to shut down Tony Kelly? I think you probably would, wouldn't you?
I think so, yeah.
Now, Lyons had a tough time against him a couple of years beforehand in Thurles, remember, in that first round Munster game during COVID. But I don't know, there was too many things that felt like they didn't quite make sense. So I'd go with a flat D. I don't know.
I'd probably go with a D. I'd probably go with a D minus, being honest with you, because if you were looking at, like, you're looking at a team that was in the 2020 All-Ireland final, a team that was in the 2021 semi-final, a team that won the league in 2022. Like, if you pick out, let's just say, Conor Prunty, Tyg de Borca, Calum Lyons, Jack Fagan, Desi Hutchinson, Austin Gleeson, Stephen Bennett, like, you're looking at, like, guys that didn't be taken on any team in the country. You know what I mean? So, like, I just think, yeah, I'd probably go with a D minus, being honest with you. But I'd settle on the D. I'll go halfway with you if you want. But I think we're probably grading harshly enough. So, in general, so I'd say we probably should be consistent and go with the D minus.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, because we've been harsh enough on others. That's a fair point. So we'll come back